What if everything we thought we knew about the spread of early Christianity was wrong? What if a single word, one geographic reference buried in ancient texts, could completely transform our understanding of how the Christian faith reached Western Europe? Today's story begins with a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries. When the Apostle Paul wrote his famous letter to the Galatians, was he writing to Celtic tribes in modern-day Turkey, or was he actually addressing the people of ancient France? It sounds like a simple geographic mix-up, but the implications are staggering. This isn't just about correcting an old map, it's about discovering that Christianity may have reached the heart of Europe centuries earlier than anyone imagined, carried there by the apostles themselves in a coordinated mission. The controversy centers around one of Paul's most important letters, his Epistle to the Galatians. For generations, biblical scholars have assumed Paul was writing to Celtic tribes who had migrated to Asia Minor, in what we now call Turkey. These people were known as Galatians, and they had indeed settled there after a great Celtic migration in the 3rd century BC. It turns out that some of Christianity's most respected early authorities had a completely different understanding of this letter. And their interpretation opens up a historical rabbit hole that leads all the way to ancient France, Britain, and a massive apostolic mission that most people have never heard of. Enter Cardinal Baronius, a 16th century Vatican librarian and church historian whose credentials were impeccable. This wasn't some fringe theologian with wild theories. Baronius was the leading Catholic historian of his era, with access to documents and martyrologies that most scholars could only dream of seeing. After years of systematic examination of ancient sources, Baronius made a startling recommendation: the Roman martyrology should be corrected to read Gauls instead of Galatians. But Baronius wasn't alone in this interpretation. Going back even further, we find St. Epiphanius of Salamis, a 4th century bishop who lived much closer to the apostolic period. Epiphanius had something modern scholars lack. He was fluent in Greek, Hebrew, Syriac, and Latin, and he had access to traditions that were still relatively fresh. According to Epiphanius, when Paul mentioned that Crescens is in Gaul, this wasn't a confusion of geographic terms, it was exactly what the Eastern Church understood it to mean. Here's where the story gets really interesting. Both the Galatians of Asia Minor and the Gauls of ancient France were Celtic peoples. They shared the same ethnic heritage, the same tribal structures, and even similar names. But this wasn't just scholarly confusion. According to Perry Longueval, a researcher who studied Eastern Church traditions extensively, there was actually widespread agreement across Eastern Christianity that when Paul wrote about Galatia, he was referring to Gaul. Even when ancient manuscripts read Galatia, the understanding was still Gaul. This wasn't a mistake.